Jennifer Lincoln will give us a few updates. Then we'll hear from Simon and Frankie. We're very lucky to have them joining us today. Simon is the head of safety training and services at Seafish, and Frankie is also the fishing safety manager at the Royal National Lifeboat Institute, or the RNLI, and they're both talking about Manoverboard events today, and they're pretty amazing training that they're doing, which I won't talk about more, but it's very exciting to hear about. Then we'll have about 20 minutes for discussion and anything else people want to share with the whole group. We always have a little time to share any news or updates that people have. So please do let us know if you have anything. And does anyone have any questions before we have an update from Jennifer? Okay. And just remember, along with being recorded, keep your mic muted unless you have something that you'd like to raise. You can always use the reactions to raise your hand or to ask a question. So Jennifer, if you'd like to go ahead and share your update.
Sure, I'm happy to. Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Lincoln. I work for NIOSH here in the United States. I lead the NIOSH Office for Agriculture, Forestry, and Fishing Safety and Health. And I'm pleased to give you a few updates on some things that I'm aware of. So for folks on here that are also from the United States, I just wanted to let you know that we're trying to put together a session at PME, and so I'm particularly wanting to highlight the work that has been supported through the Coast Guard and NIOSH grants. So if you received an email from me yesterday, I hope to hear from you by the end of the day tomorrow about your interest in participating in that. And then for the entire group, I wanted to mention that another quarterly call that we have with the NEC group is one that focuses on mental health in commercial fishing. And this group has met for 1 year so far, and really have explored the issue of mental health and stress in the commercial fishing industry in the United States. And we've decided to decrease the frequency of those meetings to a quarterly cadence. And it occurred to me in prep for this call that there may be others on this call that may also be interested in this topic. So if you are, please just drop a note in the chat and we'll capture that and we'll add you to that call. The next call, Lucy just sent out the invite for that, and it'll be in May, I think. But anyhow, it's just, I get so much out of these discussions. I thought that adding an international perspective to this mental health conversation would be quite good. So like I said, if you're interested, please put a note in the chat. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention to the group, which I'm extremely excited about, is that you may recall the last time we met, I wasn't able to come, but I had asked Rebecca to talk about iFish 6 and let folks know that we're trying to get some people trying to get it off the ground. And I had a couple of people reach out to me, and one in particular was the Florence from the FAO. And so right now, I'm Florence and Julie Sorensen and I and Casey Elliott are trying to figure out if we can do this, but I'm optimistic enough to mention it today. So we're working to hold iFish 6 at the FAO in Rome in January of 2024. So this is, brand new news. We're still trying to figure this out. We're currently seeking sponsorship for the events that, for events and things like scholarships for people to come, translation services, and then even the smaller like coffee breaks and lunches and things like that. So we're trying to work through those kinds of issues. And we also have a meeting with the Lloyd's Foundation next week to talk further about this. So anyway, I would say that you can pencil this in for sometime in January of 2024. I hope that the next time we meet, all of you will have received a save the date and perhaps would already be working on abstracts. But anyway, we're working on this. I'm optimistic enough to mention it. So anyway, I'm thrilled that I can say something about it during this call. And happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Jennifer. That is great news and great work. It's really exciting. So, well, I think we've got a lot of great people on board today, and thank you all for joining us. And Simon and Frankie, thank you for taking the time from your busy schedule. Yeah.
Rebecca, I'm so sorry. I see that Florence is actually on the call. When I started speaking, I didn't think she was. So I do want to give her an opportunity to say hello because we've been working so closely together on this.
Super. Florence, can you introduce yourself? There you are.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see me. Okay, I've got my small daughter next to me. She's singing, so maybe it's not the right time to introduce myself. But I'm responsible for fishing safety in FAO, and I'm also thrilled as Jennifer, the idea that we could hold the next iFish conference in FAO. So I hope we will have we can secure that and meet you all in person. Over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Florence. Great to meet you. And Simon, would you like to share your PowerPoint?
Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, I'll just get set up. Just bear with me.
And a reminder for anyone else who joined late, we do want you to keep your mic muted until the question time at the end. We will have 20 minutes for questions and discussion, and this is being recorded, just so you know. Thank you all.
Can you see my first slide? Is that visible?
No, we can't see anything.
See anything? Okay, let me try that again.
Not yet, Simon. Whatever you did last time, try that again. Maybe unshare and yeah.
I'm trying to share.
There it is. You got it. Good. And now you just need presenter mode.
Just check that sound is sharing. Yes, that's sharing too. Good. Right. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Simon Potten. I head up safety training and services at Seafish Industry Authority, or Seafish as we're commonly known. And today, myself and Frankie Horne, who is Fishing Safety Manager at the Royal National Lifeboat Institute, is going to be talking to you about our efforts to change fishers' behaviour and attitudes around man overboard in the United Kingdom through delivery of a series of man overboard awareness events. It's going to be a joint presentation that I'm doing the front end and the back end, and Frankie's going to talk about all the exciting stuff that we do on these events in the middle. But first, if you'll just bear with me, I'll give you a little bit of background information to us, our organisations, and what we have been doing. So Seafish is a levy-funded public body that exists to help the UK seafood industry thrive in the UK. We've delegated responsibility for mandatory fishermen's basic safety training, and we're heavily involved not only in fishermen's training, but also in a variety of fishing safety projects as well. The RNLI is a charity operating in the UK and Ireland, and it's dedicated to saving lives at sea. It's often described as the fourth emergency service in the UK, and it's usually the first responder to emergencies at sea. And it has a dedicated fishing safety team, which obviously is headed up by Frankie. Both of our organisations are members of something called the Fishing Industry Safety Group in the UK. The Fishing Industry Safety Group is convened by the UK's regulator for maritime safety, the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency, and it comprises representatives from the fishing industry, from the shipbuilders, from our Marine Accident Investigation branch, and other organisations like Seafish and the RNLI, who work directly with fishermen to improve safety. The key priority of the group is to identify and address the most significant causes of casualties and loss of life. And in 2017, it published a 10-year strategy to eliminate what we call preventable deaths in the fishing industry. That strategy recognised that fishing safety had improved steadily since 2001, but preventable fatalities had remained static at around between 7 and 9 per annum, which meant that statistically fishing was and still is, sadly, the most dangerous occupation in the UK. The strategy identifies man overboard as the biggest single cause of fishermen's deaths, and it accounted for almost half of all fatalities in the 12 years prior to publication of the strategy. Following its publication, numerous projects were undertaken, mainly focused on providing fishermen with what was then voluntary equipment, such as personal flotation devices, designed to improve their chances of survival and recovery in the event of them falling overboard. We didn't initially do an awful lot of work about trying to prevent man overboard happening. It was more focused on the equipment side. The wearing of PFDs has since become mandatory, but fishermen sadly have continued to die from man overboard incidents. And there's been little evidence so far that PFDs are being worn regularly and constantly when working on deck. And we've even had a few tragic cases where PFDs were carried on board and have been found hanging up in the wheelhouse, still in their bags, in fatal accidents, which is really tragic. The Fishing Industry Safety Group concluded that more needed to be done to change fishers' attitudes and behaviours towards the wearing of PFDs and man overboard prevention, basically to make the donning of a PFD every time you go out on deck to work the same as putting a seatbelt on every time you get in a car. So building on the success of what we called a cold water shock event, which sounds horrendous. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but cold water shock event for fishermen and sea survival instructors that we delivered at the RNLI's training facility. We got together and came up with a proposal for rolling out a series of similar events for fishermen throughout the UK, using facilities that had environmental pools which could simulate at-sea conditions for people when they're in the pool. We soon realised that the cold water shock element of these events, though highly impactful, couldn't be replicated at other venues where they needed to maintain the water temperature at a certain level and weren't prepared or able in this day and age to lower the temperature and then reheat the water at great cost. However, we found that the swell created by the wave machines and also spray and wind machines still made for a highly impactful experience. So in July 2019, the UK government approved funding of £1 million to support delivery of the Fishing Industry Safety Group strategy. And we were able to secure £200,000 of that to deliver what we expected to be a programme of 12 events at 6 environmental pools across the UK and Ireland at an average cost of £17,000 per event. I'll say more about that towards the end of the presentation, but that funding was intended not only to cover the cost of hiring these facilities, but also to reimburse participants any travel, subsistence and accommodation costs if required. And in addition to that, we included payment of a £200 training grant to participants. I think we initially envisaged that to be a contribution towards loss of earnings for taking a day away from fishing in order to attend these voluntary events. But we ended up calling it a training grant to avoid any misconception that it was in any way a lure to get people to attend. So I'll come back at the end of the presentation to explain what we've delivered. But now I'll hand over to Frankie, who's going to talk about what we do on these programs, why we do it, and also to talk about the impacts that we've observed it having on participants. So over to you, Frankie.
Thank you, Simon. Can you hear me okay, Rebecca? Yeah? Thank you, thank you. So just a little bit on my background. I've been on these meetings quite a few times now, so hopefully you're aware of what my background is. But my background in the past has been 40 years commercial fishing, as well as 30 years in the rescue service here in the UK in the RNLI at my station on the Isle of Man. I'm currently in a station at Bangor in Northern Ireland, so if they get called out, unfortunately, we might have to close down, but hopefully they won't. So the part of the course that I want to talk about, or the project, is we've shown you the videos before about what we do with the fishermen, how we put them into the environmental tanks and bits and pieces. But we've gone a bit further than that now. We've got over 500 fishermen through these events, and I want to talk a little bit more about the format of the event and how we've sort of looked for a golden thread between each event, sort of, and I'll come to that in a minute. So basically, the basis of it is we get the fishermen to wear almost identical clothing to what they wear at sea should they be fishing in a sort of climate of, you know, UK type of temperatures, where they would wear heavy clothing, hoodies, jeans, boots, oilskins, wet weather gear, and no life jacket, no PFD whatsoever. We put them into the environmental tank and just let them go, let them swim, and we take them right to the point where they start the drowning chain, where they actually lose control of the ability to help themselves or rescue themselves, and they will start to drown should somebody not intervene, being a rescue swimmer who's right alongside them in the pool. We'll show you some videos of that in a minute. So the exercise is how far do we have to take them before they will believe that they've lost control of the situation and they do need to wear a PFD of some sort. Over 95% of the candidates have to go to that point where they lose control, where their head goes under the water and they need somebody else to rescue them. There are some candidates who give in earlier and say, no, I've had enough. And there are other candidates who just say, no, I don't need to get into the pool. I've learned my lesson just by looking in the water at other people. I've got the message. So about 95% of them do need to enter the water, and they do need to be challenged, and they do need to be taken to that point where they've lost control. Can you go to the next slide, Simon, please? So what I've done, so that this is not an exercise, this is not an academic study or anything, it's just something I've observed through the events, is we have 3 different kind of standards of events. We have a bronze event, what I call a bronze event, where we are in a normal swimming pool, where we have just a pair of shorts on and a t-shirt and an abandoned ship life jacket and some clothing. So that's all the clothing they have. They wouldn't have the normal working clothing on. The pool temperature will be about 28 degrees and the water is always calm. These type of events only show a technique for using the equipment. They very rarely show any reality, but you could add to this type of event heavy clothing. One of the problems we found with these pools is that the people who own them and run them tend not to want us to bring fishing clothes into them because of pollution of the pool or whatever. So it's a really hard event to get running there, a bit more cost effective, but the actual effect on the candidate is quite low. So my analogy for fishermen is, we're the type of people who, if you tell them that the hot plate is hot, they'll not really believe you until they really touch the hot plate and then say, oh yeah, that is hot. They're not the kind of people, or most of us are not the kind of people who will say, oh yeah, I believe you. We have to be challenged, or we have to physically see it or feel it before we can understand that kind of, yeah, we need to do something about that, maybe put a guard up or wear a PFD. So a bronze standard event really gives you a low impact, and behavior change is quite small at that type of thing in a normal swimming pool. Next one, please, Simon. If you move on to a silver event, which you can see here, what I standardize as silver, it's calm water. This one you can see on the screen now playing, that is 17 degrees water. And this is a fisherman with no PFD. He hasn't been in there very long. And within seconds, he's had enough. And we tell them, don't give in on the silver events. Don't give in until you've had enough, till you cannot do any more. What we were quite shocked about on that was how quickly they give in. You can see the guy there in the picture there, just having a little prayer before he goes in the water. You will notice in these type of events, when they're wearing their full working clothing, that they are quite nervous about entering the water. So they do have some understanding of the fact that it's going to be harder than they think. And basically at this point, the talking's over, they have to get on with it. So this is working clothes, boots, oilskins, calm water, rain, and anything I've shown up there and highlighted in different colors is something we try to carry through to each event if we can, so being the rain and the working clothes. Calm water, cold water, it doesn't really matter that much. You can get the same effect in them pools, provided you have the clothes and you have the boots and the oilskins and the proper working clothing. You move on to the next one, Simon, please. So when you move to the gold standard events, what you end up there is with wave action, fully clothed, fully booted up, swells. We can create different types of swell, whether it be long Atlantic swell or short sharp swells, like turning overseas. Again, the rain makes a massive difference in these events. It doesn't matter whether the water's warm or cold. That only affects their ability to do things in the water, like open a PLB or climb out. It doesn't affect the buoyancy of the person in the water. And we can put wind on in here, and the other thing we can do is turn the situation into a dark situation where it's now a nighttime situation. Through all these exercises, we get a behavior change. If you start with the bronze one, you will get a slight behavior change towards safety. If you move through to the gold one, you get a really big, effective behavior change. Survival times in the water average about 2.5 minutes. And that's whether the water's calm or whether the water's rough, based on the fact that the buoyancy of the person and the clothing is lost within minutes. Sorry, excuse me, within seconds, and therefore they get into difficulty very quickly. Description from one of the events we had in the Republic of Ireland, working with the Irish fishermen, was just quite simply how quick they lose control of themselves and how quickly they disappear under the water. And that would match with investigation reports that somebody was afloat, they were seen, and then all of a sudden they disappeared. Next one, please, Simon. So the golden thread between all them courses is, for me, is the clothing and the rain. If you can simulate rain in your training and put just by using a hose pipe, it interferes with their ability to orientate where they are, and it simulates salt water in their eyes and in the sea, and therefore they sort of interrupts their train of thought when they're in the water. And it has a massive effect on them. I can't believe how many times people have got out of the water and said, it's the rain that put me under, it's the rain that made me lower my jawline in. It's really effective way of training. one thing that you've got to do at the end of these events is leave them with a positive thought. So if you put them into the water and you leave them with all them negative thoughts of, I can't survive, I can't do this, and I can't do that, you've got to get the PFD on them. They've got to go back into the water with the same clothing and then learn the fact that actually I cannot sink. And you can see in the picture on the left, they're all quite happy. This is at the end of a session. We've done getting out of the water, we've done getting into a life raft, we've used different pieces of equipment. But by this time, they're really, really tired, but they're confident in the fact that the life jacket will not let them sink. They can use their hands, they can do different things, they can breathe. So never ever leave them with the negative they went into the water with. They've already got that stored. Leave them with the positive that if you use the PFD and you use it in the correct manner, you will not sink. The other things you do there, you can see in the center there, there's a picture of a fellow who's made his own rescue ladder. Stuff like that causes behavior change. So the first part of putting them into the water without a PFD creates the better behaviors towards looking after themselves, maybe building something for themselves to get out of the water. Now the picture on the far right, that's a picture of a crew who's entered one of these events. None of the crew wore PFDs. None of them believed in the PFDs. That's a picture 3 months after an event. Skipper sent it to me. They're all wearing the PFDs and they're all working with a crutch strap, which is quite amazing in that job, what they're doing with pots or cages, whatever you call them. So you can get a really effective behavior change using the different types of environmental tools, but you must have the rain, you must have the clothing. Otherwise, they'll come away with that thinking they can carry on and do whatever they want. And the most, if you can use the bigger the environmental tool, and the better the wave conditions, and the better the conditions are, you get a slightly bigger effect, but you still can get a behavior change in calm water. Cold water even better. Next one, I think, Simon. Some of the feedback we've had from, we'll leave this thing, Rebecca can have these slides and she can send them out to you, but this is just some quotes from fishermen who have got out of the water without a PFD. And one I've highlighted is a very strong one, which I use, is I can't believe how quickly capable people become incapable in cold water. And that came from a long-time fisherman who just couldn't believe what he was seeing. I think that's the last one, Simon. Thank you.
Wow, thank you both. As always, you offer us a lot to think about, and having been through your,
Rebecca.
Yeah.
Rebecca, just
oh, go ahead. Yes.
Frankie misled you by saying that's the last one. What he meant, that's the last one of his slides.
Oh, go for it. Yeah.
I've just got a couple of final slides, if I could just run through these. I think I mentioned at the start that this program actually started in 2019. In fact, we'd literally just done our first one in November 2019 when the COVID pandemic struck, and we had to basically suspend the program and restart it. But we had £200,000 initially. We got a further £60,000 from the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency. And literally just this last week, we finished the final 2 events, and we've actually delivered 43 of them in total now. And we've had 511 fishermen attend across those 43 events. And the really good news from my point of view, obviously, I'm, as you probably imagine, Frankie's the presenter and the hands-on deliverer of these events. Seafish is more about the organisation of them. But we managed to get these events delivered at an average cost of £6,000 per event. If you remember earlier on, I said that the budget was based on £17,000 per event. And part of the reason why it ended up being so much cheaper than we'd expected was because the operators of these environmental pools all really got on board with the program and really wanted to help efforts to improve fishing safety. So quite a few occasions they didn't even charge us anything for use of their facilities, which obviously enabled us to do an awful lot more than we had thought we were going to be able to do. But you know, as you will have seen from the comments, you know, we've had some really good engagement from the fishermen that have attended, and they've gone away either, you know, ensuring that they will always wear a PFD. In some cases, it's about upgrading their PFD for greater buoyancy, investing in a personal locator beacon, installing a man-overboard recovery ladder like the picture of the skipper that Frankie just showed, or even modifying their vessel to mitigate the risk of a man overboard. We got lots of really good media coverage throughout the programme, and really importantly, many of the participants shared details of their experience via their social media. And we all know how effective peer-to-peer communication in the fishing industries is. However, we're under no illusion that experiences like this fade over time. It would be great if we could keep these events going. You know, cost and time are a challenge. Frankie and I may be delivering this presentation, but organising and delivering these events has been a massive team effort. It would be great if we could build this sort of experience into basic sea survival training. I'm sure some centres probably already do, but maybe not with the fully clothed fishing ready kit on. And I think, you know, for me, this has certainly highlighted that we need to make the practical elements of all our fishermen's training courses much more realistic and impactful if we're going to send people away with the right attitudes and behaviours. In terms of impact, obviously it's still quite early to say what impact this programme has had, and also it's quite difficult to isolate the impact of these events from all the other initiatives that are being undertaken to improve fishing safety. But this is details of the number of fatalities in the UK fishing industry. The previous graphs I showed had been up to 2017 when that Fishing Industry Safety Group strategy was published. After that, things definitely improved, but 2020 gave us, you know, a new record low number of fatalities in the fishing industry. But bear in mind that was the year of the COVID pandemic, and we need to explore it further, but it's possible that there was reduced fishing activity or certainly reduced fishing intensity during 2020 because of the difficulties posed by the pandemic that could have contributed to that particularly low figure. And then in 2021, we were all blown away by a tragic year in which in the UK we lost 10 fishers. And again, there's a suggestion that that might be an aftershock from the COVID pandemic, where you had more fishers at sea more often, fishing harder, further, more intensely than perhaps they did previously, in order to make up for loss of income during the COVID pandemic. All speculation at this stage. We need some further research to establish that, but I do wonder whether any other countries have noticed anything similar from those 2 years. It's quite anomalous for that time period, as you can see. And then just to end on a slightly lighter note, I just wanted to say that this initiative has a lot to thank IFISH for, as the idea of this programme was actually conceived on the back seat of a school bus. For those of you who attended IFISH 5, you may have gone on this trip, that we were transported to the excellent training centre in St John's, Newfoundland, during our attendance at IFISH 5. And it was following on from that Frankie and I started to hatch the idea for this programme. So thank you, IFISH. And that is the end of the presentation.
Thank you both. Very inspiring, and I'm sure there's good questions here in our group. So let's just open to some questions and discussion for Frankie and Simon. Go ahead and either unmute yourself or raise your hand, whichever you prefer. Go ahead, Russell.
Okay. So the whole thing is so incredible that it's a next level training, which we're all going to have to live up to. But it's really great. I wanted to say the fishing partnership over here on the East Coast of the United States, we do all our in the water training in the ocean, and have done it in a blizzard, just because seasonally we never know what the weather is going to be like. And it definitely has a bigger impact on the fishers in bad weather to see what they're really looking at. But I was very interested that the mandate to wear life jackets didn't really make a difference. I wondered if you could comment on that, because we're always regulating everything and making things mandatory, but it seemed to backfire almost.
Yeah, thanks, Russell. Yeah, so the mandatory wearing of PFDs came in 2018. The only exception is if the owner skipper of a fishing vessel conducts a risk assessment and determines that it's not that the risk of man overboard has been mitigated by other measures, and that's the only occasion when it's possible for crew to not wear PFDs. But I think the problem with the regulation, I mean, the regulation came in, the issue was enforcement. There wasn't any active enforcement of this regulation. That has now been addressed. So our regulator is now using drones and aircraft to photograph vessels working at sea, and there have been prosecutions resulting from that sort of enforcement activity arising from that technology too. So enforcement, prosecution is definitely the stick to make that a success. Hasn't gone down that well, as you can imagine, but sometimes that's what it takes.
Frankie, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, like you can there's lots of regulations for lots of different things that we don't always have much success with. You're right, but the understanding of what the PFD does is more important to get the regulation to stick. So for a fisherman's point of view, he doesn't really understand the importance of the PFD, because we train them in shorts and t-shirts. We train them in such a safe environment, and we only train them in abandoned ship, a vessel loss rather than man overboard. So these are slightly different training. Great to do training in the sea, but I take it's with survival suits. They're abandoned ship survival suits. So what we're looking at here is their ability to survive a man overboard accidental immersion. So they fall, slip, trip, fall in their work, in the environmental clothes that they wear. And what we found is that even our trained sea lifeguards, people who are trained, swimmers in cold water, they struggle to do it with the clothing. They said they get further than our fishermen get, but they say, I'm just running out of steam very quickly. And we've had some of them fail within 2 minutes. These are seawater trained lifeguards, because they're not in the normal clothes. And it's the fishing clothes that really cause the problems. It's the wellies, it's the oilskins, it's the hoodie. And the impact of that is so much different when we train them this way. So we're training for accidental immersion, not but what they get then is the understanding of why the regulation is there. So the regulation is there because of this, but we've never actually highlighted the man overboard situation to them before. Thank you.
Quick question, then I'll get out of the way. How long is this training? Is it 1 day, 2 days?
Yeah, the training goes on. It's 1 day, but we've managed to now. We needed a whole day to start with for the program. We've now got the program where we can run it from 12 noon, and we finish with them by 6 p.m. Thank you.
Lisa, would you like to go ahead, and then Core after that? We can't hear you, Lisa. Unmute yourself. No, you are. Okay, we'll give you a minute to figure it out. Why don't you see if you can try again, and Core, go ahead.
I hope you can hear me. Yeah, okay, wonderful. Thank you very much for a great presentation. Wonderful way, I think, to create awareness. I was wondering if you ever thought about an initiative to make a model course for the IMO SCCWF. Last February, the working group on the comprehensive review of the SCCWF finalized the work. It's expected the MSC will adopt it in spring next year. And although not that many countries have ratified it, it's a take up. And it's quite common that member states will offer to promote or to create a model course. And this part would be a training in the model course. And I think that would be excellent and will be mandatory for all countries that have ratified the SCCWF.
Yeah, thanks, Core. I think that's a really good suggestion. Of, we're struggling at the moment thinking how we're going to be able to sustain this program now that our funding and very generous funding, I have to say, has been exhausted, and converting this into a formal training course or at the very least, as I think you might be suggesting there, building the lessons that we've learned from this program into the practical drills of the personal survival techniques course that's part of the mandatory suite of qualifications there is definitely, I think, the way forward. We as I said in my comments earlier, we have to make the practical elements of fishermen's training much more impactful than they have been to date.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lisa, do you have your mic working now?
So?
Yes, you're good.
I've been having problems with it every once in a while. If I'm on mute for a while, when I click over, it seems to go away. So I just want to make a comment of just some of our experiences here in Nova Scotia and some of the work that has been done with fish harvesters. And I appreciate the angle that you've used in this training because of the fact that a lot of it is behavior change and trying to find ways to have that light bulb moment and putting them into a situation where they're experiencing different events and seeing the challenges if they are in the water, and the fact that having a PFD on is something that will aid them in that kind of a situation. So one of the things that we've done, and we started back in 2012, was to use a diver, and we would use boats and actually simulate a man-overboard situation with a PFD, showing how a PFD goes off. But also, our light bulb moment was always about that moment when you have to try to retrieve someone from the water and the difficulty that entails when you think, okay, this person's over, we just haul them up. And a lot of times when you have the gear on and everything, it's very difficult. It's not an easy step. And that's where we've seen a lot of the guys incorporate different retrieval devices, such as ladders. We have different pieces of equipment that people have rigged up themselves, and that has been effective. But I do like the concept of putting them in that situation of what it's like to be in the water, because with using a diver, the diver's the only one that really experiences what it's like to be in the water. So putting them in that situation definitely brings them into a different comfort zone. And it definitely creates that light bulb moment of, what it's like to be there. And I know for us, it was more, let's avoid having people go in the water because now you know how difficult it is to bring someone, and giving them a chance to come up with their own plan as to how they're going to bring somebody back up, so that when it comes to an emergency situation, they've experienced that situation of, they've already come up with their plan as to exactly how they're going to do it. So great job with the work that you are doing, and it's always great to see what other countries and fishing groups have incorporated to help to resolve this issue of people going into the water.
If you just respond to that. So you're absolutely right. One of the biggest problems we've had is man overboard recovery. So the second part of the project is the recovery of a person overboard. So we teach them, we get them to come up with different methods themselves. We discuss the methods that they have and are they viable or non-viable. So like large trawlers, large high-sided trawlers, we talk about, at what point do you launch a life raft? Do you launch it early or do you launch it late? Or were you ever going to launch it at all? Most of our casualty evidence shows that a life raft was not launched in the man overboard situation, especially on high-sided trawlers, and therefore the casualty couldn't be recovered. It was a fatality, even with a life jacket. So we go through all the man overboard scenario from small boat to large boat, and we get them to act it out. We get them to get themselves out of the water fully clothed. We get themselves and the mates out of the water fully clothed, so they can experience the weight, the difficulty. And in one case there on a calm pool, we put a boat in and we said, just get in the boat. No equipment whatsoever, and they couldn't get in. They couldn't get up the side of it. These were big, strong lads, fit lads. And then we just put a couple of simple little things there, like a rope ladder somebody had made or a tire, and they were able to extract themselves from the water. But you're absolutely right. Yeah, the man overboard recovery part of it. So we have the situation where they don't have a life jacket and they're struggling, and therefore they only have a few minutes to be extracted. With the life jacket, they're still in trouble, but they've got much expanded time now to be extracted. And then in the life raft, again, they've extended their survival time much further. So yeah, you're absolutely right. The PFD is only the extension of time for somebody to rescue them. Thank you.
The other element I'll just add to that is about drills. There's a big concerted effort going on to get fishing vessel operators and their crews to undertake drills. I mean, it's a legal requirement. Again, coming back to the point we've just been discussing, there are a lot of legal requirements that are difficult to enforce. So there's been a real focus from our regulator on every time they do a vessel inspection, they require the crew to go through a drill. And I've lost count of the number of incidents where vessels have had man overboard recovery equipment on board, which is a tick in the box for the compliance with the legal requirement, but they've never practiced using it. And so when the situation arises and they need to use it, they're floundering. They haven't got a clue. And we've lost fishermen through that, which is, it's as tragic as Frankie was describing the incidents where we lose fishermen who are wearing PFDs, who are floating next to the boat, but the crew can't get them back on board. And we definitely need to be doing more in that regard too.
Can I follow up, Frankie, and Simon, with something you've said a few times about the time you're finding for folks in the pool when they're wearing all their working gear before they hit their drowning limit is about 2.5 minutes, which is just incredibly short. And I'm just thinking of so much of the literature that's out there. Even the wonderful 1-10-1 rule for cold water survival gives you, 10 minutes to have meaningful action of saving yourself. Are you getting some of this information out in any format for people beyond, this group is fantastic, but just think that's very important information to disseminate?
I know that the RNLI are looking to put a paper together on this. Discussions took place on this about a week ago, so I'll keep you informed of that. But we definitely need to get that information out, because it's based on the clothing, the environment clothing that they're wearing, and this is the key to all the structure. Is, you know, without the clothing, they can go on to that 10 minutes, but it's still only 10 minutes. It's the clothing that really hampers them and brings them down. John Connaughton's on from BIM, and they've recently just produced a video, a similar video to the RNLI had, but a more recent one with their different characters in it. And I was amazed when I seen it actually. You know, we're 4 or 5 years down the road, yet we've still got the same. It doesn't matter where they come from, what they're fishing for, what size they are. It doesn't really age they are. It's just there in the video, quite clear. So I'm sure John might share that with the group in the next, or can pass that out to you. But it's a really good video, and some really good characters in there who tell the true story.
We can't hear you, John. Try unmuting again. Your mic isn't working. Well, we would love to see that information, John. If you want to connect with me after the meeting, maybe we can find a way to share it with the group, because we're not hearing you. But this all is super important. And I think it was just very interesting to hear you really prioritize the different things, Frankie and Simon, between real work clothing being the most important, that rain also had a big impact, because the things you're offering between cold water and waves and rain and darkness and clothing, that whole gold standard, which I've personally experienced in your pool, and it's pretty incredible. It's very interesting to hear you say the top ones are the clothing and the rain, and how important that is. And so I think the more you can get this information out to people, the better. This is just very important. Charlene, I see that you had put something in the chat. Would you like to unmute and read it? Otherwise, I can read it for you.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, but didn't want to talk. I was just having a very static question at the time. It'd be good to see the people who have been training in the positive stats and the people who haven't had training in the positive stats, and if people have asked you for those comparisons or not.
Yeah, perhaps I could just respond to that in your comment, Charlene. No, I'm hesitant to. I was hesitant to put a reply to your message, because I'm a little bit superstitious about commenting on things like this. But we haven't yet lost. Thankfully, we haven't yet lost anyone who's attended any one of these events. But similarly, in previous initiatives, we've encouraged other voluntary things like refresher training, redoing basic safety training, unbelievably, is not a legal requirement. So we've got people in our industry who did sea survival training 30 years ago, or worse still, first aid training 30 years ago, who undoubtedly will have forgotten everything that they ever learned about the subject, but there's no legal requirement for them to redo it. So we've had programs of funding fishermen to re-attend basic safety courses free of charge, in order to refresh their knowledge. And I've always liked to think that people who come forward to do that will be the sort of people who will avoid having accidents in the future. But inevitably, there are occasions when we lose fishermen, and we look at the accident reports. I look at their training records, and there's someone who has been really proactive in refreshing basic safety training, undertaking additional voluntary training, yet still accidents happen at sea. And whether it's that they haven't put into practice what they've learned on those opportunities or not, you can't really always account for that. And it's tragic to see when people who and see doing the right thing still suffer as a result of this noble profession.
Yeah, sorry for a difficult question. I should have had more caffeine before I formulated that one, but thanks for your very nice answer.
I'll just add to that a bit, Charlene, if I may. You're absolutely right to ask that question, because they are going to the point of drowning, what we call the first stage of the drowning chain, where they can't keep their head above water. They've lost control, and without the aid of a rescue swimmer. So that's why when we put them in the water, into that vulnerable situation, they are one-to-one with a rescue swimmer, and the rescue swimmer never takes their eyes off them, and they just slide afloat straight into them and stop them from going under. But yeah, you can't be a meter from them. You've got to be a foot from them, because it happens so quickly that it's seconds. It's 1 or 2 seconds. They're fine, and then they've just lost control and gone under. So yeah, it's the right question you asked, because you do have to be that close to them. Thank you.
I guess I kind of asked because I work at that in the government regulation space, and I know what the high up decision makers think, and it's all stats based. They want a 2-pager, and they want these clear numbers before they can do a return on investment calculation and then offer money for events like this. So I'm kind of thinking, what sort of questions would they ask? As you do. Anyway, thank you.
John, you looked like you were leaning forward. Is your mic working again? Oh, no, it's not. Okay, we'll connect afterwards. Okay, John, we'd love to be able to share your work. So we are in the last couple moments here. Does anyone have a last question for Simon or Frankie? And go ahead, Russell.
I just wanted to say that we start our safety training season tomorrow. We have our first training of 10 or so that are coming up, and that this forum is so inspiring. I'm always so excited to enter into training. I'm a full-on believer, if that's the right word, or I love every moment of it. But what we saw today here is so inspiring. Now I feel like I'm on fire for the season. So I want to thank you all for sharing all this incredible information. It was just such a great meeting. Thank you so much.
Well, I want to thank you both too, Simon and Frankie. It's very inspiring, and I think the question about making some sort of international model of this, just to make sure this is really something that other people can replicate. You've done so much hard work to put this together, and the thoughts even of ending on a positive note with the fishermen, all the things you've thought about, and probably even more than you realize you've thought about, but there's a lot of details you've put into this, and I think if there's some way to share it out with the larger training community, that would be very valuable, and just so appreciated. And you mentioned prevention in the beginning, so sometime we want to hear about that too from you all, because we know you do a lot in that area as well. And just talk about gold standards. You guys really do bring a gold standard to this work, so thank you. And just so appreciated. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, June 7th. And we'll be sending out an agenda for that and more information as well. So thank you all very, very much. Appreciate it.